We're looking at practice exercise 7.13, which is the longest sorted sentence. Pretty big method here. Go ahead, read the instructions, try the problem for yourself, and then come back here. Okay, now that you're back, let's go ahead and solve for this. So we know it's a public int and then our name. We're taking an array of integers as our parameter. The reason why we're returning an int is because we want to return the length of the longest sorted non-decreasing sequence of integers. We're given an example of this and another example down here. So now that we know that, let's go ahead and code it. The first thing is this very basic condition right here. We want to return if 0 is passed, or we want to return 0 if an empty array is passed. So we're just going to check our length in here. That's all we're doing. If our length is equal to 0, well, we just want to return 0. That's simply it. After this, we know that we are going to at least start with 1, right? Because if we start our sequence, if you look at this example, it's 5. Well, it starts with 1 right here. So let's start our sequence with 1. We'll do int, and we'll call it sequence, and we'll set it equal to 1. Now, notice we can have multiple sequences in here, but we only want the longest one. So we're going to have another variable that holds the actual longest one and compares our current sequence to this. So we could call this like current sequence, and this one's sequence. It's a bit long, so we can just do int longest, and we'll set it equal to our sequence right now, which is basically setting it equal to 1. You could also set it equal to 1. It's going to be the same thing. After this, let's make a for loop to run through our entire array. We'll have a for. Now, the way I'm going to do this, I typically start my for loops at 0. But what we're going to do is, if you start it at 0 and you go all the way to the array length, you might get an array out of bounds. You can try it and see what you get. So for this one, I'm going to start at 1, and I'm going to compare the previous index to our current one. I'll re-explain that in a second if you don't get that. So we're going to say int a is equal to 1. We're going to have a run as long as it's less than our array dot length, and then we're just going to increment this every single time. So inside of here, we are going to have our checking statement. So this is where I'm going to kind of re-explain it. So if our previous element, so that's ARR, not at a, but a minus 1, is less than or equal to our ARR with our current index, then we're going to want to be inside of this if statement. And inside of here, we're going to do two things. So we do need these braces. We're going to first increment our counter, which, remember, we called our sequence. Sequence here is just a counter. And then after we do that, we want to check if our current sequence is greater than our longest. Because if it is, well, we got to upgrade or update our longest. So if the current counter, which again is our sequence, is greater than our longest, then we want to set our longest equal to count, which is our sequence. Just want to make that very clear. Sequence is a counter. We're incrementing it every single time. So that is basically going to be it for these checks. We can close this if statement. Now, we can't close this for loop yet because there's one more thing we have to do. If it is not less than, right, if the previous element is not less than this, that means it's greater than, and we've broken our sequence. And so if we want to restart. So if not this, we'll fall into this else, and we'll say our count is now equal to 1. So this is sequence. Sequence is equal to 1, and then once we're done with that, we can break out of our for loop, and then we can come down here and just return the longest. Returning the longest, that should really finish everything off. Let's press submit, and we can't find the variable here. Variable length is an issue. The reason why it's an issue is because I have an issue spelling. Passed 6 out of 6 tests, and that's how we go about solving this practice exercise. The code right here.